And welcome back to Gold Shields. This is Dan Murphy along with my partner in crime, Tom Smith. Tom, tell us about our guest today. We're so excited about this.
We are. We've been planning this for a while, and we know it's our first show on our YouTube channel. So we want to make sure everyone hits that subscribe button,
That's
get more
right.
subscribers, get more viewers, and it just helps us out. And we couldn't be more honored for our first guest to be on our YouTube channel, Gold Shields, than Jonathan Hatami. John is a deputy district attorney out in Los Angeles County on the other side of the country, but his message, his career, his story, and what's going on in his life right now is going to impact the entire country. Believe me when I say it, and we'll get into that. His resume reads like a movie. He reads like a superstar, and he is. And he's going to get mad at me for saying that, but he is. Uh, from growing up in a really tough situation in New York, and he'll get into that with what he had to go through in his personal life, and then taking on law school. He only passed the bar in 4 different states. I mean, that's kind of, he
Slap.
should have studied a little harder, but it just shows how just dedicated and intelligent and great a man this is. And we're going to get into a heartbreaking story that Jonathan ran. But let's get at this. Jonathan Hatami, welcome and thank you for coming on Gold Shields.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a complete honor to be here and to be on your show. I'm so appreciative that the two of you have me on here to talk about my life, some of the cases that I've handled, and what's going on out here in Los Angeles.
So, before we get into some of your career as a prosecuting attorney, which is the stuff of legend, let's talk about a little bit about, I think it helps to be a cop or a prosecutor to have been a victim at some point in your life, to have been in those shoes, to have done that walk, to know what that feels like. It gives you some empathy, gives you a frame of reference for it. You had that experience growing up, didn't you? Didn't have it easy, did you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. First one, being a prosecutor, two married to a police officer, so we sort of have a law and order type of family here in Los Angeles. And then even through my family, my mom was born in Brooklyn, and her dad, my grandfather, was NYPD in New York. My uncle on my mom's side was a police officer in Long Island in Nassau County. I have a cousin who was a deputy sheriff in Bath, up in upstate New York. And so I do come from a long line of law enforcement, and then my wife also being a police officer. And so, I know it's tough being a family member of a police officer, number one. I could tell you firsthand it's tough being a husband with having a wife who's a police officer. Even today, my wife works a 40 as a detective, so 40 hours a week, usually 4 10s. But then she has 3 separate shifts of overtime a week because the sheriff's department is short over 1,000 deputies. So she had to work overtime this morning, 6 to 2. And so even though I'm a deputy DA, I'm taking my kids to summer camp in the morning, and we usually kind of balance that. People don't realize that police officers, they're short staffed all over the United States, all over the country, and it affects families. And so even though I handle cases and I'm a prosecutor, we do our best. We have a son and a daughter because my wife, has the shift work, and shift is tough where she's a detective, but she also has to do patrol because she's short staffed. And also, people don't realize that I get scared for her safety. She's my wife and the mother of my children. And so, and we have 2 young children. I have a son who's 10 and a daughter who's 8. And so I want her to make sure that she comes home safe. And at the same time, as a deputy DA, I see cases where police officers get hurt or even murdered. And so, yeah, you don't want to even get that call. And so I do believe being a husband of a police officer, or being a wife, every day when that officer goes to work, could be the last time you see them. And so, I do my best to make sure I tell her I love her and that she knows I love her. And, I usually send her a little text saying, be safe and, don't do anything. Make sure you have partners with you, or make sure you call for backup, things like that. But it's also good because she calls me about cases and things regarding search warrants or things regarding, hey, can we do this or can we do that? And so it's kind of nice that, we have that relationship where if she needs to get a hold of a judge to get a search warrant done, or if she, has a question about, does she have enough probable cause, or what does she think about this case? Should they remove the child from the parents, or, who should they contact? Her and I have a good relationship like that. And then vice versa, I do as well. If I have some cases that are set for prelim or whatnot, preliminary hearings, and I don't know something the sheriff's did or some protocol, I usually call her and ask her about it, and she'll give me some information. So we have a really good relationship regarding that.
That's great. You know what, Dan? We took one of our catchphrases for our show is to give a backstage pass, and you have the ultimate backstage pass, on both sides, and both of you can use it. And I think just what you just laid out, the respect is there on both ends, and that's what you need. Especially when you have the jobs that we have, you have to have that respect factor, and you have to have that acknowledgement of what's going on, and the possibility that in a blink something can change drastically, and understanding that. But so you're basically you started as a New York kid, out in where'd you grow up in New York?
So I was born in New York City, a University Hospital in Manhattan. My mom's from Brooklyn. My dad immigrated to New York from Iran, and they met in New York. And I was born in University Hospital in New York City. My brother was also born in New York. He was born in Queens. And so we lived in the city for a little bit, and then we lived in Jamaica, and then we lived in Bayside. And so, but my parents had a tough relationship. My dad was very, very physically abusive and emotionally abusive. So I had a really tough childhood. And my mom and my dad also really didn't get along. They had a really tough relationship. And they ended up getting separated. And it was a pretty bad separation. And then they went to court in New York. And my mom got temporary custody of my brother and I. And the next day, she took the both of us and kidnapped us, and we flew to Florida. And we lived in Florida for about a year. And so I was about 4, almost 5 during that time. And my dad searched for us, couldn't find us, contacted the police, contacted the FBI. And then from Florida, we stayed there for about a year. We drove to California, to Los Angeles. And I grew up in San Fernando Valley, which is sort of the outskirts of Los Angeles City. It's LA County, North Hollywood area, Sylmar. And then I ended up in Santa Clarita, where I went to junior high school and high school. And so during that time, my dad didn't know where we were, and he was searching for us. And he ended up putting a picture of my brother and I in the Ladies' Home Journal. And it's funny talking to people now because we don't really have magazines anymore. We have the internet. But back then, we did have a lot of magazines. And the Ladies' Home Journal had a layout of about 300 children who were missing. And both my brother and I were pictured in the Ladies' Home Journal as missing. And somebody noticed us from California. My mom was a nurse out here in California. They noticed us and they called the authorities, called the police. Nowadays, if you kidnap kids, even if you're a parent, it's a big deal. You get the Amber Alert. You can really get in a lot of trouble. But back then, it wasn't as prosecuted as it is now. Sort of like DUIs, DV. I think over time, things change and they become a lot more serious. And so my mom ended up getting a slap on the wrist. But I had a really, really tough childhood as a result of that. And so I did spend about 4 or 5 years in New York. I was born there, and I still have a lot of family who lives there. My dad still lives there in Queens. I have cousins who live in Brooklyn, Park Slope. I have some other cousins who live in Manhattan in the city. And then I have a pretty big family who lives up in upstate New York, in up there, upstate, where sort of close to, I think, Cornell. So up there where it
Oh,
gets kind of
okay.
cold.
Yeah, Finger Lakes region.
Uh,
Sure. Ithaca.
yeah.
Hmm.
So I have still a big group of family in New York, and I also took the bar there, and I ended up working in New York City for about a year before I became a deputy district attorney.
Wow.
Wow.
A lot of moving around, a lot of moving parts going on in your existence. And
Yeah, I mean,
right.
it's I went through a lot of trauma as a young child physically, and then I went through a lot of trauma, as a teenager, just trying to understand, what my mom did, my dad, and um, you know, it's tough. I think I'm still upset at my parents. My brother doesn't talk to either of my parents. Um, so it's a tough situation. I have another half brother and two half sisters. So we have the siblings, have a pretty good relationship. Parents, not so much. I love my parents, but I think probably throughout my life, I've always wanted them to love me, and just been a struggle as far as that's concerned. And I think my brother, he really hasn't forgiven them for that. But for me personally, when I graduated from high school, I joined the Army, and it totally changed my life. And so right out of high school, I was in the military. It sort of became my dad and my family. And it really kind of turned my situation around. I got in a little bit of trouble as a teenager as well, and so I was having some issues, but the military really changed my life.
That's great. Um, so how much time did you do in the military? 2 years?
In the military,
Yeah.
I did 7 years, and two enlistments, from 89 to 96. My first enlistment was 11 Bravo, which is infantry. And so right out of high school, and I then ended up changing my MOS, which is a military occupational specialty, to 95 Bravo, which was MP. So I did about 3.5 years in the infantry, 3.5 years as a military police sergeant and staff sergeant. And so pretty well rounded, about seven
Yeah.
years, and ended up getting honorably discharged as an E6 staff sergeant. So that's why I also get along with a lot of the police officers. There's not that many deputy DAs who are in the infantry. I think I'm the only one that I know of down here. So many infantrymen or don't necessarily get their JD, and so but there's a lot of infantry in the police department, and so we have a really good connection. I have a very mutual respect between me and the police officers is important, and I view them as my equal, and I think that probably helps with my relationship with them. Whereas I think some deputy DAs have a sort of a I think they believe they're a little bit higher or better than them or something like that. I'm very much, we're all equal. And so I know a lot about firearms, and so I think police officers know a lot about firearms. So that's sort of a good thing. But I get along with them really well. And we kind of have a lot in common just regarding a lot of the stuff I went through in the military. And, the police department is very structured like the military. And so I think that that helps with my relationship. It also helps with my cases. Being able to lead by example, being able to get up there and lead and take charge. I think a lot of police officers like that, and that's how I handle my cases. And I think they're appreciative of that. And when I'm in court, I make sure that we get the job done, and I'm pretty big at doing that. And so I think they appreciate that I do that. And then I treat them as part of my team. We're together. Like in Los Angeles, I'm not sure how New York works exactly, but in Los Angeles, my detectives sit in the same table I sit in. They're my investigating officers. They're part of my case. I ask them questions. I'll usually ask them after I'm done, talking to witnesses. Hey, do you think I should ask something else? I let them be a part of, opening and closing as far as let them have input. And they're a big part of my case. And so, we hang out, we go over the case. And so, they're family to me. And I have some really great detectives in my cases. The child abuse cases, you get some really good detectives who really care about those cases.
It's a little different in New York with go ahead, Tom. Yeah,
The
we don't
one
sit
thing
at the
I can say
prosecuting
is,
table,
yeah,
separate
we
federal
don't
court.
sit at the table.
Federal
We're not
court,
even in the
you second
courtroom.
seat. Yeah.
I've noticed that. So I
Mhm,
watch on some. It's just we have a different, and not every DA has their detectives at the table. We're allowed to here in California through the penal code, but I'm one of those that they're on my team, and
mhm,
so and they sit with me throughout the whole thing. Even jury selection if they want to. Sometimes jury selection can take a while. So and they're busy. And sometimes they rotate, and I usually will tell the jury, listen, my police officers are out there protecting people. And so, they're busy. And so they can't sit in court like every day. And so
mhm,
we'll rotate, and sometimes they may not be able to be there for whatever reason. But they're there for opening, they're there for closing, they're there for when the verdicts come in, they're there for sentencing. I've had some officers even make, impact statements.
mhm,
I let them be involved in the entire case. I keep them informed about what's going on. And so they're a big part of my case. And so I know New York is sort of a little bit different, but I think it's important. I mean, first off, I don't consider it my case; it's the family's case. And then the police officers, it's their case as well, and they investigated it and they spent a lot of time on it. So I try to keep them involved. And when we settle cases, so I rarely settle my cases because they're murders, but sometimes we do settle them. Sometimes people do plead guilty to murder. I get the police involved and make sure that the settlement's okay and they're okay with it because it's their case. And so, yeah, I have a really good relationship with the police, and maybe people um, see that as different, maybe outside of California, and some people
mhm.
within LA may see it as different, but it works really, really well. And I think that we have a very good mutual respect for one another, and we work well with each other, both the police and I.
One of the things Tom and I say all the time is no one knows your case better than you when you're an investigating detective. And a prosecutor can get to know it as well, or maybe not quite as well, but there's a lot of gain to be had by having the person who's the encyclopedia on the case, who's lived with it, sitting next to you in a trial. And there's many times I wish I had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, no, it's invaluable because the detectives, know so much. I'm a little lucky because I also roll out to my cases. So certain cases that are big cases, we roll out. So usually I'll get a call and then I'll head out and I'll go to the crime scene and meet
Hmm.
with the detectives, and I'll help with things like that. I go to the autopsy with the detectives, so it's the medical examiner there, myself, the detectives. So we do a lot of stuff together. And so I'll see a lot of these things before I file the case. But in general, the detectives know so much. But they're great. I mean, just like, I can and digress and just talk about the Gabriel case a little bit about it. I can tell you that I was with the detectives. We would go to the crime scene and pretty much, for 8 months, they kept Gabriel in this cupboard, inside the bedroom in kind of this small little area, and they would lock him in there. And I talked to my detective. His name's Tim O'Quinn, really great guy. And I said, "Can we remove that, cupboard off the wall?" It was basically connected into the wall because I said I want to bring it into court. I
Hmm.
want to show the jury. And Tim was great. He's like, "No problem." And he got some people in there, and we removed it. And we booked it into evidence. And I used that. I brought it in for opening, brought it in for closing, and they put a picture of that in the Netflix documentary. You see that, but I
Hmm.
wouldn't have got that if it wasn't for Tim O'Quinn, and just asking him, "Hey, we really want, that. I think that would be great for the jurors to see that."
You know, I
So my detectives are really, really top notch. People don't know because most of the time, you guys, you kind of shy away from the media, which is totally understandable. But and I'm usually always trying to shove my detectives in front of the media to try to get them, to show the public that these are just normal people and their moms and dads, and they care about these cases and they care about these kids. So I could tell you that. I mean, Tim was in the Gabriel case. He anything I asked him to do, he did it. Hey, let's book this into evidence. Hey, can you send that to the lab to be tested for DNA? Hey, can you do this? He did it. So there was nothing that Tim didn't do in that case to try to get justice for Gabriel.
Mhm. One of the things I was just going to say is, on a lighter note, if you tell virtually any hardworking cop or detective in this country at a crime scene to rip something out of it with great force and malice, it will be ripped thoroughly, quickly, and with a great deal of vengeance. You tell me to destroy some part of some disgusting criminal's residence? Thank you. You just made my day. I can't imagine he was upset about that. Uh, and an
No,
an
no,
amazing piece of evidence.
and
You couldn't speak to a jury in a way that little piece of wood, that little shed, so to speak, that little cabinet that he was forced to stay in could speak. It speaks volumes. So brilliant move.
And it's, I think looking back, and I can tell you, and I think you guys know as well, I think in, the 80s and maybe 90s, people for the most part believed police, when they would come into court and testify. Nowadays, they don't. And so you really have to think outside the box as far as, okay, what else are we going to bring into court to try to show the jury that the police are telling the truth? And, it's not just the police saw something and they come in and testify to it. Nowadays, it's really hard because a lot of people, for whatever reason, basically because of the media, people don't believe police as much. So you got to think, okay, what else do we need to get to show to the jury, no, this is accurate, this is truthful. And so usually I'm always trying to look at other things. I also bring in firefighters. So, a lot of my cases have firefighters because, they're usually called out first to try to save the life of children. And so they're usually there with the police. And a lot of times you'll have the police officers, giving CPR and the firefighters together. But I try to bring in as many witnesses as I can to try to, show the jury, look, everybody here is telling the truth. But we also try to get a lot of, evidence. And so that's really a good thing also. And I can tell you too, and I think a lot of your listeners probably don't know, I also help my detectives with their search warrants. So we try to help each other. They write the search warrants, but many times they'll, email me or call me and say, hey, what do you think I should put in here that to help us, try to get this evidence, that will be important for the judge to read. And so usually I'll write up a few little things and I'll put it in there as well. And then what I do is on my other cases, I'll give it to the new detectives and say, hey, this is what we did in the past case to help you out. And we help each other out. And I think it's part of, teamwork. And for me, they do so much to help me out, especially when I don't understand certain things that are happening or whatnot. And
The
they're really
best
good at that.
cases, the best cases I worked on, in either Manhattan or the Bronx, when you have a working relationship, and I don't just mean a relationship with the DA, it's invaluable because you end up being on the same page, you end up thinking the same way, you end up asking the same questions and feeding off each other in a way kind of brothers do or best friends do. And it only makes the case better because now you're thinking alike. Something will pop into your head and he's already asking the question about it. And you just roll from there. And it's good for you for realizing that's how cases get done. Dan and I both said for years about our careers, there is not one case, one arrest, one case, one prosecution that Dan and I did alone. I mean, it's impossible. It's never done. It's a team thing. And the stronger that team is, the better the case is, and the more time that bad guy does in jail. So hats off to you for realizing that and getting that as part of your just MO when it comes to cases. The one thing I just want to touch on, you spoke about the Gabriel Fernandez case, and I really want to get into that because it's so compelling and so sad and tragic. But it's something that kind of, I don't want to say shaped you, but had an enormous impact on your life. And I think our listeners would just love to hear, on top of the Netflix series, your account of it, your feelings about it, everything involving you with that case. So let's hear about that, because it's a tragic case.
It definitely made me a better DA, the Gabriel case. I think it also made me a better father. It definitely impacted me in my life, and it's something that I'll carry with me. I think till I pass away. And so I've handled thousands of cases, and I've handled quite a few cases after Gabriel. But I think that no matter what, the Gabriel case will probably stick with me the most of any case I have handled or I will handle. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that. Um, uh, a couple is, I was a young DA when I first got that case. And so, you know, as a young DA, when you get sort of a really, really big case, it does impact your career and impact the way you see things. I also was recently married, and then, my wife, Roxanne, she gave birth to my first child, our son. And, shortly after that, the Gabriel case came into my life. And so, that was a big aspect of it as well. As I had a really my first child. I was a dad, and so handling being a dad at the time, Roxanne was on patrol, and she was, I think she had just got off of training, and so I would come home from work and pick up our son Jonathan from daycare, and then take him home, and I would bathe him and feed him while Roxanne was working patrol, and so at the same time I had the Gabriel case. So I think those things do affect when you have cases. And so that definitely, things that were going on in my life outside of that case. Plus, then I'm dealing with such an emotionally um, difficult case to handle, and so um, tragic and so egregious. The amount of injuries Gabriel had, the amount of trauma he had, how long he was abused. I mean, pretty much anything that ever you could imagine happening to a child happened to Gabriel. He was shot with BBs. His penis was burned. His penis was cut. He had, a fractured skull. He had ruptured kidneys. He had massive internal injuries. He was injured from head to toe. They would burn him with a hot spoon all over his body. They would scrub his body with Brillo pads. Um, Pearl Fernandez knocked 4 teeth out of his mouth with a baseball bat. He wasn't able to go to the dentist or doctor. He had to eat cat litter and cat feces and cat urine. He was force fed throw up and vomit. And then, every night he was locked in this little cupboard, and they would put, a sock in his mouth, and they would tie up his hands, and he wasn't eating. And there were so many other things that they had did to Gabriel. And so, you're dealing with that. You're trying to, juggle your wife working patrol. You're raising a baby. You're trying to be a good dad. You also were abused as a kid yourself, and so you're trying to come into terms with, how to be a good dad, which is always hard because if you're not raised properly and now you're trying to raise somebody else, it becomes tough. Because you do a lot of things to people that have been done to you, and
Hmm.
so that's another big challenge. So you're kind of juggling all those different things at the same time, and so
So
yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot.
So you're a new father at that time, and the three of us are fathers, and it's been a while for me since my children were born. They're older, but Tom can probably attest to this as well. When you are a man and you have your first child, something in you changes. Your natural paternal instincts kick in, and you become incredibly aware of your emotions and sensitivities towards these feelings you have towards this baby who now becomes such a focus of your life. And you become incredibly protective because that's part of our nature. And you're generally more sensitive to little children because now you have one, and it's a whole new world of emotion, feeling, sensitive. All this kind of stuff opens up in a man. And at the same time, you've got to deal with an unbelievably horrific case of abuse. Not a one time smack to the head that the kid fell down and fractured his skull. Not a spanking gone bad. We're talking about ongoing abuse, mutilation, disgusting acts by the mother and boyfriend. This, it had to have rocked you, Jonathan. I mean, you're talking about it in a lot of ways, but that would have rocked me to my core. I would have had a very hard time dealing with that.
Hey everyone, just want to take a quick break from the show and let you know about a really important company that Dan and I and Gold Shields are affiliated with. They are actually the official coffee company of Gold Shields, and that's Bone Frog Coffee Company. Bone Frog is an amazing company founded and run by retired Navy SEAL Commander Tim Cruikshank and an amazing team. These guys take it head on. Not only do they develop and have developed a great tasting coffee, which everyone knows they need in the morning and in the afternoon to get going and then keep on going. And they provide that. And their names of their coffee is awesome. We got Bone Frog Blend, we got Frogman, and a host of other names that are really cool with K cups and decaf and dark roast and medium roast. A whole array for you to be taken care of, okay? And the other big important part, and the thing that drew Dan and I into Bone Frog, was what they do financially for the Naval Special Warfare community and the families of Navy SEALs. And that is provide financial support when it's needed. These men and what they do, the Brotherhood of the Navy SEALs, the missions they go on, the unthinkable actions that they take on, and they ask for nothing in return. So what does Tim and his team do? They switch it on them, and they give back to these men who lay it all out on the line for our freedom every single day and every single mission. So the least we can do is give back and help support them. And you can do that by going on bonefrogcoffee.com, checking out their merchandise, just like this great shirt that I wear proudly when I'm out and I get asked about, and I get to tell them about Tim, his team, and Bone Frog and what they do for the Naval SEAL community. There's merchandise, there's a gift shop, incredible stuff. Make sure you go on it, bonefrogcoffee.com, support the Navy SEALs, support Bone Frog, and support the official coffee of Gold Shields. Thanks again. Now back to the show.
It was hard. He was also, I think he was sort of treated like a prisoner of war. And so you just saw all these things that were happening to him. And it just, more and more things kept coming out. And you were just like shocked about all these different things that they were doing to him. It was, and every day you get something new that you'd hear that happened. And it would be like, what? And you were just, and then it was in the news almost every day. And so, and people who are in law enforcement and in the DA's office knows that once something gets in the news, it becomes much more heightened, and your chain of command is all, up in what you're doing, and they want to know what's going on, and starts becoming micromanaged, and, it becomes intense. And then, the social workers, they were being, examined because, they went to the house, numerous times and didn't remove Gabriel. And then the police officers got investigated, and because they went to the house and they didn't write reports. And so, you're juggling being a prosecutor, having a relationship with your detectives, you know, concerned that, the sheriff's department is the one who has this case as well. Some of their own deputies, feel bad now that they did something wrong. It's in the news every day. People are talking about it. Everybody feels like they're going to get in trouble. And you're at the head of that storm. And I was just, a young DA. Came in the office in '06. I got the case in 2013. And so, I wasn't like this really, really experienced prosecutor. I had handled a lot of cases, but not like that. Not like that, it was such intense, media on the case. And I had never really had a case where the police were accused of doing something as well that wasn't good. And so that's also, my wife's a deputy in the sheriff's department. I have my detectives in the sheriff's department. And then I have, some deputies in the department who are accused of, maybe not doing what they're supposed to do. And then I have a lot of social workers. And all my cases involve social workers. So now I have all these cases where social workers don't want to talk to me either because they're afraid that, on other cases, now, Hatami's going to get us on these other cases. And people don't realize all this. And it's not just me who had to deal with it. The detectives, they're in their office every day. They're dealing with it. And then you have the higher ups. And I know that a few times the higher ups took my detective's file and they got upset. And so you have all these things in the background going on at the same time. And it's hard. And you're trying to deal with all of that. And you have your other cases. I think during the time I had Gabriel, I was carrying a load of about 40 cases. So it was really intense up in the Antelope Valley. I think all the DAs who were doing my type of cases had between 30 and 40 cases. And so I'm handling Gabriel, which is such a big case. Plus I had, another 40 cases, many of them, children who needed justice, a lot of them children who were sexually abused. And so you're kind of juggling all these cases as well. And I'm a new dad and, my wife's, on patrol and you guys know early patrol is hard because, it's like you get, they give it to you, you have to learn how to be a good police officer and that requires you to work on patrol, number one. And then you got all these other people who've been there so much longer and, and you have to work a lot harder and a lot more overtime and, do all your reports and usually write other people's reports as well. And so, my wife's going through that at the same time. And so, yeah, it was a lot. People don't realize, and my relationship with Roxanne was tough because I was angry because I get so mad at like viewing stuff that was happening to Gabriel and it would just get me upset and get me angry. And I think police officers relate to that too when they go to these scenes where people are hurt or injured or abused, and especially if they're vulnerable. Yeah, we get angry because it's like we don't understand why humanity can be that like bad, where people can do all these bad things. And so people don't get it. You're like dealing with all this outside trauma, and then you got to come home and raise your child, and get along with your wife. And, and it's hard. It's like, and then the next day you go and you see another murder. And so those are things people don't understand. And emotionally, it got to me a few times. And I'm better now. I'm a better dad and a better husband as a result of like self-reflecting on, the fact that sometimes I wasn't a good person, and I needed to figure out how to kind of be better and what I can do to deal with these type of cases and also deal with my relationship with my family and then be a better dad. And so it took me a while to understand that, to also apologize and to try to figure out how to be, better. And I'm in a better place now than I was back then. I work out a lot more. That I do. I take a little of my own. I need some personal time to myself to make sure my head's in the right place. I do that. I try to focus more on my family and my kids and my wife, and I do still focus on the job, but I try to not let it overtake me. And even though it's hard, so I learned a lot from Gabriel, and that these are things that a lot of people don't know about, outside of the case, and then the burden of you don't want to mess up. You want to make sure that these two get prosecuted, that Gabriel gets justice, his family gets justice. And you guys carry that like I do, and it's a huge burden. You don't want to mess up because you feel like if something bad happens, it's our fault.
Right. I
We
was
we
actually
messed
just
up.
gonna, yeah, I was just gonna ask you that. That was gonna be actually my next statement and question to you. We all have, whether it's one or two or three, you always have that case, that you have in your career that you have to get it right. You have to nail this person down or these people down. And I can imagine the one thing we didn't mention, Gabriel was 8 years old, correct? When all
He
this
was
was
8.
going on. He was an 8
Yeah,
year old boy when
yeah.
all this was taking place with him, and everything that was going on that Jonathan just described was an 8 year old boy. And when you do cases like Dan and I did, like you you did your entire career, when it's a child, it takes a whole nother different meaning. It takes over, your emotions different, your actions different, your focus is different, because that person, not that a adult that's a victim can defend themselves, but a child really can't. And we take that burden on of defending them, whether it's before or after a tragedy. And this, unfortunately, was afterwards. I mean, did you have that moment during this when the trial was going to start that, hey, this has to be my A game? I cannot mess any part of that, which stresses you more. You have enough stress as it is, but now you have the burden of I cannot lose this case. Not that I don't think you would have, but it's still in your mind. Juries are juries. Uh, so did you go through that whole part of this case?
I did. Probably the toughest part of that thought process was when I had to bring Ezekiel in Virginia, from a different state, to Los Angeles, to testify in trial. And, you don't know how kids are going to testify. And you don't know when you bring children into court and they're facing this person who tortured and murdered their brother, and did stuff to them too, that they have to sit in court 10 feet away from this person and then have to say what happened. Um, and then you're talking about all the jurors in there. We had 12 jurors and 7 alternates, so 19 jurors. We had a packed courtroom every day. And then we had, all these cameras. And so, bringing kids to have to get up there and talk about their mom and this boyfriend brutally torturing their brother, uh, is hard. And yeah, first I felt guilty because making them having to come out to Los Angeles to even do that. You feel bad already because it's like they already went through all this horrible stuff, and now you're going to make them relive it in the middle of a courtroom in front of everybody else. And that's hard. And they're scared. They're scared of this person. And court, you already know is uncomfortable. And so, yeah, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know how they were going to be. I didn't know, what they were going to say. And that was a big part of our case because, these are eyewitnesses. So many times when children get murdered, you don't have an eyewitness. And so those cases become really tough, because you need the doctors, medical evidence, things like that. Well, this case, we had eyewitnesses who saw this whole thing. And, that can be very, very powerful and very important for the jurors. And so, how are they going to handle it? What are they going to say? Are they going to try to protect their mom? Are they going to just not say anything? Or who knows? Just don't know. And so, it was hard, and they both were just, uh, awesome. They did such a good job. I also don't really. talk to, or I guess, quote, prep my child witnesses. I just put them on the stand. Now, I do build relationships with all of them. So I see them, I talk to them, I go to their house if I can, I visit them, so I can build that trust, so they know that, that I'm somebody that they could trust. Throughout my, time having that case, which was about 5 years, I was there when they got adopted by their uncle. They knew me pretty well. And so, they knew me as John. And so they would always come up and say hi or give me a hug. But I try not to sit there and talk to them about the case itself. I rather do that in open in court. I think it's more powerful. And I think, the truth is just the truth. And so I like them to do whatever they're going to say, they're going to say. But it's also stressful because you don't know what they're going to say. And, I remember at lunch, I went outside and I just broke down and started crying. And a couple of the media people were there and I asked them, please don't, put that out. And they didn't. But I was having a problem. It was really difficult. And everybody in that courtroom was so silent. And I remember, after the kids had testified, maybe a few days later, one of the individuals who was filming had been to a lot of court cases, including OJ. So, we did Gabriel on the 9th floor. OJ was on the 9th floor. Basically, in Los Angeles, when you're at CCB, which is Criminal Courts Building downtown, the 9th floor is where all the big time cases happen. So if you hear the 9th floor, that's where everybody wants to be. If you're a prosecutor, you want to try cases on the 9th floor. The Grim Sleeper was on the 9th floor. Spectre was on the 9th floor. And Gabriel was on the 9th floor. Anthony was on the 9th floor. So all these cases are on the 9th floor. And this guy, heard OJ and everything. And he said that was the most intense testimony he's ever heard. We didn't have the kids film, and that was because, I objected to that because I don't like when my child witnesses get filmed, because nowadays with social media, everybody gets bullied. And so, I got to make sure that doesn't happen. But it was the most intense testimony I think I had ever been through. And it was very, very real and very raw. And I was very nervous before they testified that night and that day. But I remember after both of them testified, I looked at my co-counsel, Scott Yang, he's now a judge. So Scott Yang became a judge. So I'm really happy for him. He's the Honorable Scott Yang. I'm still a lowly prosecutor, but he's now a judge. I looked at Scott and Tim O'Quinn, and I said, I think we're good. I looked at the jurors and I was like, I think we're good now. And so we sort of started cutting some of the witnesses, and you can usually tell as a prosecutor, you look over at the jurors, you kind of know when they've had enough. And I'm very infantry, so I keep it simple. What you see is what you get. I'm very much, I could tell when the jurors kind of had it, especially on my cases where you're really talking about, the torture of children, where jurors just don't like to deal with that anyway. But before then, I was really nervous, Tom. But after that, I basically looked at Scott and I said, I think we're okay now. And my stress level changed a lot. And, obviously when they're deliberating, you're freaking out and you're nervous, and no one understands that. And the burden you're just carrying all throughout the trial. No one really understands that except for you guys. But after they had testified, then things were lightened a lot for me.
So you had the convictions. The jury spoke. They did the right thing. But the case wasn't over. There were more loose ends to tie up. Tell us about that.
So, the Gabriel case was tough because it wasn't just the murderers. And so, I think Gabriel's family and Gabriel's siblings, they'll always be, they'll feel a small sense of justice that both of these murderers were convicted, and they'll never get out. And, Gabriel's voice was heard, and everybody, especially with the Netflix documentary, everybody knows what happened to Gabriel. The tough thing was, the social workers, and that case ended up not turning out the way we wanted it to. In Los Angeles and in the whole state of California, if people don't know, we can't prosecute social workers unless they actually commit the murder. So if social workers commit the murder, well, then you could just charge them with murder, obviously, and then that's okay. But in California, the Court of Appeals struck down our case and said that social workers cannot be prosecuted for committing gross negligence. And as a result of that gross negligence, if they're in charge of a child and somebody kills that child, we can't charge them with manslaughter or child abuse or gross negligence or something like that. I know New York has done it once. I think Michigan has done it once. New York's case, they ended up pleading. I think they got a misdemeanor, but you guys have done it once. I think Michigan's done it once, but we gave it a really good shot. The Court of Appeals struck it down. I've been continuously trying to get our legislators in Sacramento, that's our capital here in California, to pass a law that says we should be able to hold social workers accountable if they commit gross negligence, and we can prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. And as a result of that gross negligence, a child under their care is murdered. I hope at some point to make that law. Right now, we just don't have a lot of support because social workers are in a union. Unions usually are pretty powerful. They're definitely controlling how the legislators here in California vote. But a lot of people are upset at that. A lot of people still want those social workers held accountable as a result of, throughout Gabriel's case, we had other cases that were assigned to me. Anthony Avalos was another. He was 10 years old and he was tortured and murdered, and social workers dropped the ball on that case. And then we had Noah Quattro, a 4-year-old who was also tortured and murdered, and social workers dropped the ball on that case. We had, Gabriel and we had Anthony in 2018, and then Gabriel in 2019. I'm sorry, and Noah in 2019. So we had Gabriel, Anthony, and then Noah. So we have had other cases where social workers made mistakes or committed negligence, and we couldn't do anything about it.
This
So
almost inconceivable, John. It's just almost inconceivable how they couldn't be held responsible legally, criminally. It's just it doesn't make any
and
sense.
I agree. It doesn't. So, I think a lot like you guys do, and here's the way I think about it is that we always try to do the right thing. We always put our best foot forward. Sometimes things don't go the way we want them to go, but we don't stop trying. We don't stop fighting. We have to respect the process because we're part of the process. And then we also have to try to see if we can make the process better as much as we can. And so I'm incredibly disappointed. At times I was angry. At times I didn't understand. It's and I'll never understand where they're coming from, because here's what I'll tell your audience, and I think you guys realize this, and this is important. If the entire country wants to hold police officers accountable for committing gross negligence, why can't I hold social workers accountable for committing gross negligence? It frustrates. Like, I tell people, so you want to hold police officers accountable, right? If they commit gross negligence, and everybody's like, yes, yes, yes. And you have all these legislators who want to pass all these laws about it. And, everybody's, wants to do it. And I said, well, social workers, they also work for the county. They also are assigned, they're specifically assigned to take care of children. Police are assigned to take care of everybody. Social workers are assigned to take care of specific children. And so there's a little bit different duty there. You're actually assigned to a specific child. Police officers are assigned to everybody. And so if you're assigned to a specific child, why can't I say you should be held criminally accountable if that child dies and you committed gross negligence? You lied about something, you hid something, you didn't do something. You said I can do that to the police. So why can't I do it to social workers? And, it's disappointing because it's the exact same thing. And so I don't understand why, you know, I can't get people to see that. I think I can, but I think that, you know, you know how politics is, and everything. Politics kind of revolves around all these different laws. And right now, children can't vote, and they don't have lobbyists. So that's a big issue. If children can vote and they had lobbyists, well, I think then you'd see a lot of things different here in this country, and especially in the state. But they can't, and
Well,
so there has to
you
be
keep
people who are
fighting,
fighting for these kids.
right?
And
Just keep
so I'll keep
fighting.
doing it. It's disappointing. I'm upset about it. I'll never stop trying. I won't. I'll never stop. I'll put them on blast as well. If I feel like social workers are doing something bad, I'm going to try to expose them about it, because I can't hold them accountable criminally, but at least in public opinion, I can get people to see what's happening, because I think the kids deserve that. My kids who are abused and murdered, they deserve the truth to come out, no matter what that truth is. And then I hope, and I think I do, I think police officers have become a lot better as a result of Gabriel. I know the sheriff's department has, and I know they saw some things that, here's what I'll tell your audience. Domestic violence is hard. And when you take young guys who are 20, 21, 22, and you make them police officers, and you then assign them to go to domestic violence calls, a lot of these police officers don't even know how to deal with their own relationship. Now you want them dealing with somebody else's relationship and somebody else's drama. Most of them don't know how to do it. It's hard because they can't even deal with their own relationship. And so you put a big responsibility on young police officers to be able to deal with child abuse, domestic violence, divorces, separations, all these things that many young police officers have never been through themselves. And now they have to try to weed through all of that. And it's tough. It is tough for them. And so they just need really good training, and they need to, be explained that on child abuse and domestic violence, one mistake and a child or a person can get killed. And people need to try to look at that and see that, and try to realize those issues and make sure that they have proper documentation. And those are important, but it's hard because a lot of young police officers don't even have kids. So they don't understand those aspects of relationships that, like we understand, at our age group. And so I try to teach people that as well. If you can't even deal with your own drama, now you want the police to have to deal with your drama, and they're young and they've never really even dealt with that themselves. And those are tough things. And so, yes, everybody needs better training, but they also need better understanding. We all need to understand one another, because police officers are just people, just like we are, and they go through all the same stuff we do. Same with DAs. They're just people. And so we all need to try to understand each other and what we do, and understand that there are some shortcomings as a result. But at the end of the day, if you choose to carry a badge and carry a gun and take that responsibility of being a police officer, or a DA and carry a badge and can charge people and take away their freedom, then you also have to be responsible if you do something wrong as well.
So, just to shift gears for a second, amazing, amazing discussion. Thank you so much for your insights on that stuff. You are very passionate, clearly, about what you do, and many, many people have found justice through your efforts and your passion. So, thank you for that. But you're not done. And, Tom and I have talked both privately with other people on the show about what's happening in this country in many ways when it comes to the criminal justice system, law enforcement, what prosecuting DAs are doing, what they're not failing to do, the impact it's having on cities, individuals. And you are taking an action now. You're undertaking a very big career under action that we are big supporters of. And would you tell us about what you're doing and why you're doing it? What's your platform? I'll let you. I mean, if our audience isn't in LA and doesn't know, I'll let you announce it. But we're very excited for you, and we want you to talk about what you stand for, why you're taking this action, what you believe um, you can do better than what's being done now. Lay it out for us, John. We want to hear it.
Definitely. So I could tell, your audience and the both of you, I've been a prosecutor for 17 years. And for the most part, before George Gascon came into the picture, I consider myself blessed. I'm married to a beautiful woman who's a police officer. She's the mother of two children. I have a son and a daughter, Jonathan and Lindsay. I have a house. I have a couple cars. I'm blessed. I think that I'm also doing what I believe God wants me to do, which is fighting for children. And so, I'm going through life, being a prosecutor, saying to myself that, I'll do that for about 25 years and then we'll see where it's at there. And, my wife has 25 years and she can retire as well. And, I'm a father. I'm raising my kids. We have a dog. And just, that's just living life. We're not rich by any means, but I'm doing okay. And so I think, it was good. And, what happened is that George Gascon came into the picture on December 7th, 2020. He became the DA. And I was carrying 17 active murders. So I belong to a unit called the Complex Child Abuse Unit. And all I really do is handle cases where children are murdered, and it's usually a bad situation, usually a mom or a dad or a caretaker or a guardian, and it usually involves some type of torture or whatnot. And it's sad to say, but in Los Angeles, we have a lot of those cases. And so I had 17 cases, and so it's a pretty big caseload. And I'm handling all these cases, and George Gascon comes into the picture. And immediately he implements a large amount of blanket policies. And a lot of people have heard of all the policies, where he wasn't charging misdemeanors, where it wasn't doing a lot of these things, which aren't good. But he also affected very, very serious cases where children were murdered. So any case that I had where a child was murdered, if there was allegations or enhancements of great bodily injury, we had to remove that. If there was allegations that they had strikes, let's say that they attempted to murder somebody in the past, or they stabbed somebody in the past, or they committed some really heinous crime in the past, and we had charged that as a strike, we had to remove all those strike allegations as well. And on one of my cases, it was a little girl, a 4-year-old little girl. Her name was Eternity, and she was tortured and murdered by her mom. And George came in the office on December 7th. That case was up for preliminary hearing setting on December the 15th. And George had ordered all of the prosecutors to remove all these allegations and enhancements on cases that we already had. So not just on new cases that he was going to file, but all the old cases that were in the system that we had already filed, that we had already talked to the detectives about, that we had already received the evidence, that we had already done a preliminary hearing, that we had already maybe done a grand jury. He wanted us to go into court and just remove things, not because of the evidence, just because he said he doesn't believe in that law. And so for a lot of people, that was difficult to digest. That was, for me, who, I didn't become a DA for the money. I became a DA to do the right thing, and I'm fighting for kids. And so, I said, well, on this case, will you meet with me? And he's like, no. And I said, well, will you look at the evidence? And he said, no. And I said, will you talk to the family members? He said, no. I said, will you talk to the detectives? And he said, no. So there's no exception, no. And so, I went through a week of not knowing what I was going to do. And for you guys who are police officers, you don't really buck the chain of command. We just don't do that because it's just not, you don't go against the elected DA, you don't go against the elected sheriff, you don't go against your chief. It's a bad situation if you do that. And most people, will tell you don't do it. And so, my wife had said, yeah, I don't think you should not do what he wants you to do. I think, we got to pay our house mortgage. We got car payments. We got our kids. You're probably going to get fired. And, I ended up talking to my pastor about it. And, I was really struggling because it was difficult for me. I wasn't sure what to do. I really wasn't. But I went into court on the 15th. So it was about a week later. And I stood in front of the judge and I told him that George Gascon's ordering me to remove these strikes and enhancements, and I'm not going to do it. and they weren't removed. And I went in front of the cameras because a lot of my cases are media cases, especially after Gabriel. And I told ABC that I refused to do what George wanted me to do. And these are all the things that are happening in this office. It's a really bad situation here. He's ordering everybody to do these things. He's making all the DAs call family members. Imagine if you're a mom and all of a sudden the DA calls you and says, hey, we now have to remove all these allegations and enhancements on the case where your son was murdered. And we have to do that because the DA told us to. And that happened. That happened to a lot of individuals. Imelda Hernandez, her son was murdered. Emma Rivas, her son was murdered. I can list so many cases. Even Anthony Avalos. George Gascon had ordered me in the Anthony Avalos case to remove the intentional murder by torture special circumstance. I went into court and refused to do it. And we had just tried that case. And a lot of people heard the evidence in that case and they were shocked that he tried to order people, and he was doing that in all these cases. And so, it became sort of this war between George Gascon and I. A few days later, he came out and said I was going to be disciplined and I was unfit and delusional. And, it's sad for somebody who's never been a prosecutor, and George hasn't. He's never prosecuted one case, to have the audacity to call me unfit and delusional. Number one, that hurts all my other cases, to call a prosecutor that. Number two is just disappointing. So, throughout that first time, I was the first one to come out, first one to tell everybody what's happening in the office. And, so I started getting a lot of media attention from that. And I would go in a lot of shows and talk about what was happening in our office. And I ended up doing a lot of rallies, and a lot of family members, came to me, moms who their children were murdered. And, George Gascon was trying to remove their allegations. It became a big movement. We've twice tried to recall George Gascon. And, as a result of that, I said to, my wife and to my family and to my friends, I'm not moving from Los Angeles. This is my home. I like it here. My wife's not moving. She was born here. My kids were born here. We're not moving. And the safety of my children is important. And so I'm going to fight for their safety. I'm going to fight for the safety of other children in this community. I'm going to fight for individuals who are vulnerable in this community. I'm going to fight for everybody, because we all deserve public safety. And so because of that, I decided that I'm going to run for DA. I'm going to take the fight to George. I'm going to tell the public that, I'm here to fight for your children. I'm here to fight for my children. I'm here to fight to make sure that our community's safe. I'm here to fight to make sure that the DA is doing what the DA is supposed to do, and that we're fighting for public safety. And so, I've been doing that now for, almost 3 years. I decided to run. I'm not really a politician, just a person, a prosecutor, a dad, a husband. But I think we need more just normal, reasonable people to try to get into politics to change things up a little bit. I know a lot about the DA's office. I've been there for a long time. I know how to lead from the front and lead by example. We have a DA right now who's never tried one case. And so it's really hard to tell other prosecutors what to do when you've never done it yourself. And so, that's a big problem. He's totally, isolated the police. We need to collaborate with the police and work with them. We file their cases. And it doesn't mean we can't hold them accountable if they commit crimes. Of course we can. I don't think there's any police officer I know of who's not good with that concept. But at the same time, they're part of us. They're our partners. And so we need to work with them and collaborate them, just like we need to collaborate with others as well to make sure, everything's running smoothly. We need to prosecute cases that are in the penal code. And so you shouldn't become the DA and right away say, hey, there's 15 crimes we're never going to prosecute. That's not smart. That's hurt New York. It's hurt California. It's hurt, Texas. It's hurt, we have 38 cities. There's 88 cities in LA County. 38 have already voted no confidence in the elected DA. And that's unprecedented because he won't charge their misdemeanors: resisting arrest, disturbing the peace, public drunkenness, possession of drugs, criminal threats, solicitation for prostitution. There's about 15 misdemeanors he won't charge. And that's ridiculous. You should charge crimes based upon the evidence. And that doesn't mean at the end of the day, we don't end up putting somebody in diversion or end up having somebody go through programs. And from that, they get better, they rehabilitate themselves, and we bring them back into the public. For the most part, all of us, I think, want individuals to be rehabilitated and coming back into society, be productive, and be good members of society. Everybody wants that. But we all know that there are some people who are murdering people, some people who are raping people. Those people should not be released. Those people deserve to be in custody. So, one, they can't hurt anybody else or victimize anybody else. We do have some bad and evil people in this country, and definitely in Los Angeles. And it doesn't mean that I don't think at some point they can't get better. But I always tell people, as a believer, I do believe in mercy, but before mercy, there must be justice. And we have to have justice. And so we just don't have that here in this society right now. I also believe in staying in my lane, like I learned in the military. And part of being a DA is prosecuting crime and making sure that the public is safe. Those are the jobs of a district attorney. And George Gascon is not doing that. And then you have to fight for victims and fight for survivors and fight for family members. They only have us. And so George has completely abandoned victims and survivors, and gone more towards the line of helping defendants and criminals. And I can tell you this: for individuals who get a life sentence, George Gascon has stopped allowing prosecutors to go to parole hearings. And so we have parole hearings where victims or family members have to go there by themselves. So imagine if you're a family member of somebody who was murdered, let's say a mom or a dad. You have to face the murderer by yourself. Imagine if there's a serial rapist who raped maybe 10 or 15 individuals and got a life sentence. You have to go and face your rapist by yourself without a prosecutor and sit in a parole hearing and have to deal with that. Where the rapist has an attorney, or the murderer has an attorney, but there's no prosecutor there. And that this is absurd. It's also just uncaring. Also, a prosecutor is there not just for the victim and for their family, but to make sure that individual doesn't get released so that person can go out into society and hurt or kill somebody else. We have to make sure people who are dangerous aren't released. We have to make sure, if they've been in custody, what have they been doing in custody? Have they been doing good? Have they been doing bad? What's happening there? Is this person, a child molester, where many child molesters, I would say all of them, don't get rehabilitated, and I don't want them out so they're hurting or molesting another child. And so, these are things that prosecutors need to be there for, to be able to protect the victim and protect the public, which isn't happening. We also have a major fentanyl issue here in Los Angeles, where dealers are spiking Percocet and other types of pills and lacing them with fentanyl. And we have a lot of teenagers who are dying. George Gascon refuses to charge those dealers with murder. We have Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino, all these counties around Los Angeles. The DAs are charging those dealers with murder. George Gascon refuses to charge dealers who kill our children with murder. Immediately on day one, I would do that. Anybody who's dealing drugs and it's fentanyl, and immediately they're killing teenagers, they should be charged with second-degree murder. It's implied malice murder. We should be doing that.
I agree.
And we're not doing that.
So
there's so many different things that I could talk to you about. That is my campaign, and things that I want to do. Things that I think are important. I will tell you one thing, just sort of, not necessarily on the criminal justice realm, but maybe something that you find interesting, or something that the public finds interesting, is that I don't believe in waiting until somebody murders somebody or rapes somebody to try to help them. I believe in trying to do that before that happens, because once that happens, you all know, usually there's not much we can do then. Then you're going to be punished, and then we got to protect the public. And so one of the things that's close to my heart is kids, especially kids in the foster care system. And so once a month, I will have kids come to the Hall of Justice, and we will try to find them forever homes. I do think if we can help find children parents, I do think that helps in the criminal justice system. I think kids that have parents, especially good parents, usually turn out a lot better than other kids. And so if we can help kids, we need to do that early on. And that area, I think, is the foster care system. So those are things that are close to my heart that not necessarily relate to the criminal justice system per se, but things that I would want to do. And it has nothing to do with releasing bad people or not charging crime or trying to fix the system after it already happens, which I think a lot of these DAs like Alvin Bragg and George Gascon and Pam Price and Chesa Boudin are trying to do. I believe in putting in the work and trying to do that beforehand. And a lot of police are involved in that too, with trying to help kids before they get involved in the criminal justice system.
That's so important. Wow. Well, I could not agree with you more on everything you said. Your observations about what is happening under George Gascon's, we'll call it failed leadership. I don't know what else you can call it. His slanted view of what his role as a prosecutor is really disturbing because the prosecutor has a responsibility for ensuring justice is done through the courts for the victims of crime, for the people within their jurisdiction. It's really kind of that simple. It boils down to that. And for you to have to go into court and to say what you had to say to judges and to buck his orders, as a man of faith, I understand where you're coming from with your faith as well. The Bible is very clear to respect authority, but it doesn't say respect it to the point where it causes people to lose their lives. There's discernment we can have, and your discernment is spot on. You stand up for what you believe to be right against authority that is giving orders that are potentially going to cause people to lose their life, and it really is that serious. So I cannot say enough to anyone who's watching this on YouTube or listening. If you live in LA County, the election for district attorney is the choice is clear. If you live in LA County and you love living there and you want to continue and you want to have a future, you need Jonathan Hatami as your district attorney, period. This is a man with the experience, with the career, with the right mindset and focus, who's an everyday guy. You heard him say it, puts his shoes on like everybody else, has learned so much in his career about what needs to get done, is watching a catastrophe happen around him and wants to be part of the solution. If you want to see LA County be in a better position, if you want to be able to walk the streets and feel safe, if you want to have public safety be an important part of the turnaround in LA, Jonathan Hatami is your man for district attorney. We support you. I see nothing but good things for you, and I don't even know what to say except congratulations on making it's a bold step, but you're a bold man. That's come through. And you have a purpose in your life. As a believer, I believe that too. And this is something that I see as a plan for you. And I can't wait to congratulate you when you're elected.
Thank you so much. That really means a lot. And I know you guys, feel the same way I do. Is people should be able to walk to the beach with their kids if they want to, wear a watch or wear jewelry if they want to, go to the store if they want to, walk their dog if they want to, drive their fancy car if they want to do that, have a home if they want to do that, take their kids to school, go to the supermarket. Just normal things that anybody does. And New York City, just like Los Angeles, a lot of people can't do that anymore. A lot of people are afraid to use public transportation anymore. Anybody who leaves anything in their car, usually when they return, it's gone. You can't even make a mistake and leave something in your car by accident because you return and that's gone. And so what people don't realize is this country is the best and freest country, but crime affects freedom. Crime affects your freedom to use public transportation, your freedom to go out at night, your freedom to go jogging if you want to, your freedom to go to the store, your freedom to wear a watch and wear jewelry. Those things are really being affected as a result of this crime surge. And a lot of these progressive prosecutors, and George Gascon being one of them, doesn't seem to care.
Right. And you know what? And to let you know, there was a reason, and we were excited about you having being on this show, our first show on YouTube, because we're going to do something we haven't done, and it's our first time doing it. That Gold Shields is fully endorsing you for District Attorney of Los Angeles County.
Absolutely.
Now,
thank you so much.
For everyone who's out there, let me explain why that's a big deal to us. Okay, we're two New York guys. Okay, LA County is on the other side of the country. We don't live there. We don't shop there. We don't drive around there. But we feel it is so important to get this message out. And thankfully, Dan and I have the platform to do that. This is becoming a nationwide show, which we are so utterly proud of.
I'm
And that was
blessed.
the reason for having you on this show. And like I said to you earlier, and everyone out there watching the show now and listening to the show, the change in this country on a crime level has to start somewhere. It has to start somewhere, and it has to start with somebody. All right, bucking the system, changing how things are. And people eventually are going to wake up and stop just voting on whatever letter is at the end of someone's name. Okay? The safety and well being of their families are at stake. And we don't say that lightly, it's a true statement. And you being district attorney is going to change that. And people can, like you said, start wearing their watches, start taking jogs again, start going to stores without 15 people running in and smashing the place and stealing whatever they want. Those days have to stop. And Dan and I fully believe it can start with you. And I think you and I, Jonathan, had a conversation, Dan, the other day that things that happen in New York and things that happen in California resonate throughout the country. That's just how it is. It's plain and simple, and it's a true statement. So if we can get you to the spot you need to be in LA, it'll resonate. It'll send a message and it'll resonate. We are so behind you. And we will do everything we can to continue to get this message out because it's so important for the country, not just LA County, for the entire country. And we wish you all the luck in the world, and we're going to be behind you, brother, the whole ride.
Praying for you.
Tom and Dan, thank you so much. It's a complete honor for you to support and endorse me and my campaign. I can't thank you enough. And I agree with you. What happens in New York and what happens in California affects the entire country. And what's happening right now in New York City and in Los Angeles, the two biggest cities in the United States, is that we have a major crime problem. We have major issues with crime, major issues with zero bail. We also have major issues with the morale in the police departments. This defund the police movement that came out in 2020 is absolutely absurd and ridiculous. Hopefully most people see that now, and most people see that we need police in our country and in our community. But still, Los Angeles and New York have been suffering as a result of a lot of their boneheaded decisions that they made, in 2020. And so I'm just so happy and so elated, and just a complete honor that both of you are backing and endorsing me for DA of Los Angeles.
And if you know anything about Tom and I are like gum on the bottom of your shoe. You can't get rid of us now. And we're going to be very, very vocal advocates for you because we really, really
Thank
believe
you.
that there's a lot riding on this. And we also believe in you. You're just such a tremendously genuine person. It's a pleasure. We could sit for 6 hours and just talk with you about what's going on, what's wrong, how can it be better. And we'd love to have you back on. But I'm going to tell you right now, when you are elected DA, at the swearing in or whatever it is, Tom and I are going to be there.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
you're
Be
both
there.
invited. Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt
Definitely.
about it. We actually talked about that already.
No,
We decided
definitely. You're
that's it.
coming out.
When John's elected,
You're
we're
always
going to come
welcome
out
to stay at
to LA.
our place. We have an extra bedroom. So
Well,
you're
given the
definitely
budget
welcome.
from the show, we're probably going to be either that or sleeping on your lawn. One or the
Right?
others, but we're going to be there.
Oh, that's definitely.
Yeah,
You can go
outstanding.
shooting with my wife. You guys can hang out and talk about stories and whatnot. You'll be all good.
Oh, that's a given. That just happens
Yeah.
anyway.
We're going to
Yes.
hold you to that. You just made a big mistake,
No,
maybe.
definitely.
Uh,
Definitely.
Well, we can't thank you
Dan, go
enough.
ahead.
Yeah, it's been such an honor for us. Thank you for your insights and for sharing some difficult stuff. Can't be easy to talk about that case or other things that you mentioned, but you're a brave man and you are a good man, and you have been a blessing to the people of LA County, and you will continue to be so when you're elected district attorney. you'll be able to make some changes and help institutionalize some change and restore some sanity out there. But Jonathan, to you and your wife, thank her for us for her service to the people of LA County as well. And everybody that knows you, and we've only started to get to know you, I'm sure is going to be very, very much behind you and everything that you're doing. So someday when you're president, Hatami, we'll be able to say we knew you when you were running for DA in LA County, and we had you on the show. But we look forward to having you back at some point for more discussion because you're a fascinating guy. Um, and thank you so much, and all the best. We're going to keep in touch
Anytime.
with you,
I'll come on the show anytime.
and let us know what we can do to help
Fantastic.
you, honestly. And we'll talk offline
Thank
about
you.
that too. Okay. Um, Thank you so much.
Jonathan, before I take us out of the show, real quick, shoot out a couple of websites or somewhere that people can go read more about you, donate to your campaign, or
Yes,
anything else you need. All right,
and
the
we will
floor
be
is yours.
donating
Go
too,
ahead.
just so you know.
Thank you. So my website is www.jonathanhatami.com. So it's JONATHANHATAMI.com. And when you go to my website, you could donate. You could see my platform. I have a campaign video. You can see a lot of the things I want to do here in Los Angeles. I'm also on Twitter at Jonathan Hatami, also on Instagram at Jonathan Hatami, and I'm on Facebook at Jonathan Hatami. So JONATHANHATAMI. I'd love for you to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can keep up with everyday things that we're doing as far as the campaign goes. And you can also go to the website. And I'd love for you to become part of the website. If you live in Los Angeles, please join our team. We need as many volunteers as we can. And all over the United States, you can donate. So any amount we'll take. And just so people know, we use that money to try to get our message out to LA County, which is huge. It's about 10 million people, about 6.5 million voters, 88 cities. And so it's a very, very big county. And so we need to raise as much money as we can to try to beat George Gascon and his special interests, which he will have a lot.
Yep. Well, let's send those
Okay.
special interests, and let's send this guy who doesn't know what he's supposed to be doing, walking and packing. It's time for the people to make a bit of a
Definitely.
revolution and stand up for what's right, which is public safety, law and order, respect for the law, respect for each other, and doing the right thing. And that's what you're all about. So, Tom told me before the show he's committing to $100,000 for your campaign. He doesn't know it yet, of
We'll
course.
take
Yeah.
it.
If we had it,
That
believe
was
me,
a
you'd have it.
that was a secret, Dan. Come on.
Yeah.
Jonathan, listen, this was everything we thought it would be. You are an absolute gentleman, a professional. And you know what? You said it before, and I was going to jump in, but it wasn't the time to do it. We don't want any more politicians. You don't need to be a politician. We have too many of them. We need someone like you with the foresight, the imagination, the backing that you are presenting, and that's what's important.
And the
And
resume. You've done it.
and the
Yeah.
resume. Yep.
Hmm.
So Gold Shield's going to do everything we can for you. We're going to pump out your websites. We're going to talk about you on other shows. Get you back on as the campaign gets closer to that magical day. We can maybe have you on. Maybe we'll see you in LA and take a trip.
Definitely.
We were talking about that as well. So we're going to see you again and hear from you again. But we can't thank you enough for right now for taking the time to come on the show. Meant a lot to us. It's our first YouTube show, and we couldn't have picked anyone better to be on the show. So thank you so much for the time and doing this for us. We really appreciate it.
No, it's an honor, Tom. It's an honor, Dan. Definitely honored. I'll come on anytime. The two of you, please be safe. Your listeners, please be safe. All those police officers out there throughout the country know that I'm appreciative of your service, and I want you all to come home safe.
Well, thank you. And
He
kind of
basically
stole my
said what
thunder a
Tom
little,
says
Dan,
at the
but
end of the, yeah. You
we,
stole his outgoing line, but that's all right.
right.
So I didn't know you were going to say
No,
that. So I usually try to like end with that.
I couldn't have
no,
picked
it's
anyone
good.
better to do it. It's
Yep,
all
that's right.
good. So listen, just on that note, everyone stay safe. Men and women in uniform and law enforcement, get home at the end of the night. And a little extra prayer today because of the show for the countless child victims out there that are still unknown, that are still, cases are still trying to be done for them. Keep them in your prayers, and a little guiding light shine on them because they're defenseless and they need some prayers. And as long as we're around, we can keep praying for them. So do that. And for Jonathan Hatami, an amazing guest, my partner Dan Murphy, this is Tom Smith from Gold Shields. And everyone out there, remember, on YouTube now, hit that subscribe button.
That's right.
Let's get
Caution
those
nothing.
numbers up. Let's get them up. And you can talk to us at contact@thegoldshieldshow.com and our website, thegoldshieldshow.com. So stay in touch, stay safe. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon.